Put that down, a low voice commanded, and for a moment Emerine thought he was hallucinating in this cramped corridor of the derelict station. He froze, gloved hands hovering over the battered case he'd pried loose from a rusted conduit. The overhead lights flickered, throwing his reflection onto the chipped walls. Slowly he glanced over his shoulder, expecting to see a stray merc or scavenger like himself. Instead, eyes that nearly glowed stared at him from the shadows. There was a distinctly feminine shape there, the silhouette elongated with something drifting around her head like silvery filaments. She glided closer, light catching greenish hints of scaly skin beneath a ragged cloak. She was breathing unevenly, as though trying to contain both impatience and curiosity in the same space. He raised his hands, letting the metal box he'd been looting clatter to the deck. "All right, calm down," he murmured. His pulse pounded. He'd heard rumors about unusual creatures inhabiting these abandoned outposts, survivors or exiles making their nests among the wrecks of old starports. He swallowed, eyes scanning for a way out. She was tall, with eyes that almost pulsed in tandem with the emergency lighting. The station's stale air reeked of ozone and old fuel lines, but her presence brought a different scent. Something musky, electric. "Who are you?" he demanded, voice sharper than he intended. Her lips curled back, revealing pointed teeth. "Your kind calls me Vélis," she said, the syllables rolling. Her voice was throaty, carrying an edge of aggression or perhaps desperation. "And you?" "Human, yes? I have smelled your blood in the corridors." Emerine exhaled slowly. So she'd been stalking him. "I'm Emerine," he gestured vaguely at the decaying surroundings. "You live here?" He knew the question sounded ridiculous, but he was grasping for common ground. People typically answered with professions or ranks. She only watched him intently, as though analyzing each twitch of his jaw. Her face was beautiful in an otherworldly way. Elongated eyes slitted like a serpent's. Along her cheeks, faint lines of luminescent patterns blinked, shifting subtly. "Not by choice," she answered. "We were left?" He peered behind her, half expecting more of her kind. She shook her head, a subtle motion that sent those silver filaments rippling. She pressed a hand to her sternum, exhaling. For an instant, her eyes flickered with a subtle glow, and he realized that behind her words lurked a tension in the way she held herself. She seemed on edge, as if a separate entity breathed within her. "I am alone," she insisted, though her voice trembled, belying some internal struggle. "But there is something with me." He took a step back, uneasy. "Something with you?" Her eyelids flickered again, and she inhaled, pressing a hand just below her collarbone. "We share the same body. It found me when I was dying and latched on to me. It keeps me alive, but it has a will of its own." Her gaze slid over him in an appraising way that sent a prickle up the back of his neck. "It's desperate for survival." Emerine's mouth went dry. He'd heard stories of parasites capable of bonding with sentient beings, forging strange symbiotic relationships. He'd never seen one in person. Now it was standing before him, apparently wearing this alien woman as both host and partner. His gut churned with an uncomfortable mix of fascination and fear. "Are you dangerous?" he asked carefully. Her pointed teeth glinted. "Sometimes. We don't want to be, but it compels me to feed, to regenerate. You must understand, we have been living on borrowed time in this place." The corridor flickered again, and she stepped forward. He realized her feet were bare on the cold metal deck. She stood a fraction taller than him, shoulders taut. "There is no way out except through that shuttle you came in on, yes? The docking bay is sealed, otherwise." Emerine considered lying, but he sensed that would go badly. "Yes, my ship's near the outer docking ring." "Maybe you could," she interrupted with a hiss of breath that wasn't entirely human. "Take me with you. I must find somewhere to continue surviving. This station is dead." He paused, turning the idea over. He typically avoided entanglements. He'd come here to scavenge old technology to sell on the black market, then slip away. The last thing he needed was a new complication. But something in her voice told him she would not take no for an answer. Beyond that, a flicker of empathy stirred in him. She seemed desperate, half choked by whatever was inside her. He stepped away from the battered case and its meager contents. If I help you, can you at least try not to kill me? Her reptilian eyes softened. The parasite doesn't want to kill you, not yet. Her mouth curled in a trembling grin that was both ominous and strangely intriguing. We want other things from you. Amaranth's heart throbbed in his chest, uncertain how to interpret her meaning, yet he found himself clearing his throat, shifting the weight of his satchel. Fine, we'll get you out of here. My ship can handle one extra passenger. Just, don't try anything that'll make me regret it. She nodded, but her expression spoke volumes about the uneasy peace that existed between them. He turned, leading her back through twisting corridors. She kept close, at times so near that her breath tingled along the back of his neck. Once, the overhead lights surged and sparks rained down, forcing them to crouch in a partially collapsed hallway. She pressed against his side to avoid the debris, and he felt the warmth radiating from her body, along with something else that might have been the parasite's energy. The flickering luminescence across her cheeks glowed faintly in the darkness, revealing sharply angled features that were undeniably alien, and undeniably alluring in ways he couldn't quite explain. They pressed on. Occasionally he paused to pry open sealed compartments, searching for anything salvageable. She watched with curiosity, not interfering. Soon they reached a tall bulkhead leading to a battered corridor with windows overlooking the bay. He glimpsed his small, scuffed ship, the only craft docked in this forsaken place. His relief was short-lived when a crash echoed from behind them. He reached for the sidearm at his belt, flicking off the safety. She tensed, slitted eyes narrowing. A hulking figure appeared at the far end of the corridor, a creature with mismatched armor plating, one of the roving pirates rumored to plunder these old outposts. The pirate bellowed an unintelligible challenge and hoisted a crude energy weapon. Amarin dove behind a broken console as a pulse shot streaked overhead. Valise snarled and darted behind a collapsed support beam. He peeked around, returning fire. His shot grazed the pirate's shoulder, eliciting a roar. As the pirate took aim again, Valise abruptly lunged from her cover. She moved with serpentine grace, weaving under the weapon's arc, and slammed into the pirate. They wrestled briefly. The pirate was strong, but she was faster. Her filaments writhed, and in a swift, brutal motion, she sank clawed fingers into the pirate's helmet. She pressed her chest to his, eyes closed in concentration. Through some unknown means, the parasite's energy seemed to flow from her, causing the pirate to convulse. A strange guttural sound escaped his lips before he went limp. Shaken, Amarin stood, smoke rising from the console edges. "What did you do?" She pushed the pirate's corpse aside, breathing hard. "We fed," she said quietly. There was no pride or pleasure in her tone, only necessity. "He won't turn. I only took enough to sustain us for a short time." Amarin's heart hammered. "Remind me to never cross you." Her gaze flicked up, meeting his eyes. Something flickered there. Remorse, maybe? Or hunger? "I didn't want to do it," she said, voice raw. "But you see now what compels me. This thing, my body," she inhaled, pressing a trembling hand over the place where the pirate had struggled. "This is what you risk by taking me with you. It will keep happening unless I find a way to control it." He caught her arm gently. "Then let's make sure we leave before more of his friends show up." She nodded, and he led her the rest of the way to the docking bay's final airlock. With the interior lights failing, they stepped carefully over broken grates, the faint hiss of leaking atmosphere all around. The station was shutting down. They slipped into his vessel, a cramped cargo shuttle with patched hull plates. The hatch groaned closed behind them. She lingered in the narrow corridor beyond the cockpit, eyes scanning everything. Her lips parted, perhaps in relief at having made it this far. He moved to the control panel, fingers dancing over the console, initiating the startup sequence. The engines whined, thrusters throbbing to life. As the docking clamps released, she pressed her palm against a window, glancing back at the station that had been her prison. There was no fondness in her eyes, only the haunted look of one who had endured too long. They broke away, and the shuttle rumbled, pushing into open space with a jolt that rattled every bolt in the hull. Amarin exhaled. "All right, we're out." Next step is not getting caught by any corporate patrols or pirate ships lurking in the region. Volis turned from the window, crossing to stand behind his pilot seat. She rested a palm on the back of the chair. Where will you go next? He shrugged. Where the money is, or wherever I can offload salvage. I have a contact on Zayton's frontier. If it's still there, he glanced back at her. I assume you want me to drop you off somewhere safe? She lowered her gaze, as though uncertain. There is no safe place for me, not while I remain as I am. The parasite isn't unwelcome among my own species, but my people are gone, scattered or enslaved. This system is haunted by those who see us as valuable commodities. The parasite is a prized weapon for certain corporations. If they knew I existed, they'd do anything to capture me. She flinched, a ripple of tension crossing her features. I can sense it inside, it's stirring again. He frowned. You need more food? A host to feed on? Is that what you're saying? She took a deep breath as if steeling herself. It doesn't just feed on energy, it also demands closer contact. If I resist, the hunger grows uncontrollable. We try to siphon from opponents in combat, but that is dangerous. Her gaze flicked over him in a way that made him shift in his seat. I'm sorry, but it senses your presence, your vitality. Amarian found himself torn between wariness and an odd surge of heat pulsing through him. Hold on, this parasite, are you implying it wants with me? Her cheeks glowed with a subtle flush. It seeks synergy. For reproduction, yes, but also for the bonding that sustains it. My species once formed pairs to keep the parasites stable. They needed a partner's biological signals. Without that bond, it rages. She swallowed hard, gaze sliding away. I'm not in full control. It will push me toward you. If you refuse, the parasite might lash out violently, drain you in ways that could kill you. I'm caught in between my own fear and its compulsion. An uneasy silence settled in the cockpit. Outside the window, the starry void stretched, infinite and cold, while inside, a new kind of tension pulsed in the cramped space. Amaranth scratched the stubble at his jaw, mind racing. So you're telling me that unless you and I... He let the words trail off, feeling heat creep up his neck. To keep you from harming me, we might have to become intimately involved? She lowered her gaze again, the luminescent lines on her cheeks shifting restlessly. Yes. He dropped his head back against the seat, exhaling a shaky breath. Of all the scrapes he'd landed in, this one was definitely the strangest. At the same time, a sliver of something twisted in his chest, a flicker of curiosity or even an unacknowledged desire. Her presence was exotic, mesmerizing, and undeniably enthralling. He cleared his throat. Okay, let's not do anything rash. We'll find a plan, an alternative. Maybe there's a scientific approach, some way to separate the parasite or at least keep it in check until it's safe. Her voice came out shaky. You would do that for me? He hesitated. I mean, I don't know how, but I'll try. I'm a scavenger, but I've got a few contacts who might have the knowledge or the equipment to help. She nodded, a grateful glimmer in her eyes. Then I'll do what I can to keep it contained. But if it stirs too strongly, I might need relief. Amarin tried not to stare at the shape of her mouth. Got it, he said quietly. But let's see if we can find a better path than me just throwing myself at it. She allowed a tiny wry smile that might have been the first real expression of humor he'd seen from her. You have courage, Amarin, and a good heart. I can almost taste it. She stepped back, leaving him to pilot. The tension in his chest did not subside, though. He found himself painfully aware of her standing behind him, of how her alien form radiated warmth, of how the faint glow from her cheeks cast dancing reflections on the walls. Outside, the silent cosmos offered neither answers nor refuge. As he set a course for Zayton's frontier, he wondered if he'd just invited a new kind of danger onto his ship. Yet despite the adrenaline spiking in his veins, a strange anticipation simmered as well, because behind her ominous warnings, Velis bore a vulnerability that pried at his guarded instincts. Maybe this was more than a survival pact. Maybe it was the start of something that would change him forever. He swallowed and focused on the controls, ignoring the steady hum of her breathing behind him. He tried to remind himself that only a fool falls for danger, but the station's gloom was behind them, and ahead lay an uncertain path that might demand more from him than he ever knew he had to give. They traveled in tense silence for some time, the ship's scanners picking up minor debris fields and pockets of cosmic radiation, nothing significant. Occasionally he glanced at Valise, noticing the way she tested the cramped corridors and ducked her head to avoid overhead pipes. She hovered near engineering compartments, seemingly enthralled by the different blinking lights and coils of wiring, as though everything here was a novelty. There was a cat-like curiosity about her, but also an undercurrent of distress she tried to hide. She lingered near him, not too close, but close enough that he could sense her watchfulness. When they finally emerged from the slipstream near Zayton's frontier, a ringed planet came into view, flanked by half a dozen battered space platforms. It was a hive of scum and corporate labs, but it offered opportunities for a man with salvage, and maybe a place to learn about alien parasites. As they approached, the radio crackled with static-laden instructions for docking. Valise tensed. He hesitated before placing a hand on hers, that scaly surface unexpectedly warm. "Don't worry," he murmured. "We'll handle this." She didn't pull away, only looked at his hand as though memorizing the contact. They touched down on platform VR, an old mining structure repurposed into a black market hub. With a groan and a hiss, the cargo doors opened to a dingy docking bay that smelled of burned metal and stale sweat. He guided Valise through winding corridors, aware of suspicious glances from the passersby. Humans, aliens, hybrids, all manner of hustlers and traders. She kept her hood drawn low, those filaments hidden, but the faint glow at her cheeks was still visible. Murmurs followed them, but no one challenged them outright. They found a run-down cantina run by an old associate of Emmeren's. Smoke haze and neon lights flickered. He led Valise to a back booth, scanning the crowd for any sign of a threat. There were rough types nursing strong drinks, the occasional corporate stooge seeking discreet deals, and a swirl of unscrupulous watchers. She gripped his arm, posture stiff. "There is danger here," she muttered under her breath. He nodded. "Yes, so keep your head down." He gestured at the bartender, who recognized him with a curt nod. They settled at a small table in the shadows. "The contact I'm meeting is a doctor of sorts, an expert in biotech. She might know something about your situation." Valise's glowing eyes flicked to him, a question unspoken. "Do you trust this person?" He offered the faintest shrug. "Trust is a strong word, but we've done business in the past." Moments later, the door slid open to admit a tall figure wrapped in a battered lab coat. A tangle of cables and an old mechanical eye told Ameren this was indeed Vatra, the rogue geneticist. She slid into the seat across from them, ignoring Velis for the moment. "Ameren," she said, voice raspy. "He heard you were dead." "Almost," he replied. "I need information." Vetra's mechanical eye whirred, focusing on the hooded figure at his side. "And you brought me a gift?" Velis stiffened and Ameren shook his head quickly. "No, she's my associate. We're looking for some answers about parasitic symbiosis, specifically an alien variety that merges biologically with its host." Vatra's real eye narrowed. "That knowledge isn't free, scavenger." Ameren pulled a small stash of rare salvage from his pocket and slid it across the table. "Payment." Vatra raised a brow, then pocketed the goods with a satisfied smirk. She leaned forward, beckoning them closer. "There are rumors of a race called the Valerians, once known for a unique bond with a reproductive parasite that granted them longevity and power. But that race was nearly wiped out or enslaved by corporations hoping to weaponize their abilities." She eyed Valise. "You wouldn't happen to be one of them?" Valise slowly lowered her hood, revealing scaled cheeks and the faint glow of her markings. Vatra drew in a sharp breath. "By the stars! So it's true." Ameren glanced between them. "How does it work? Can it be removed or stabilized?" Vatra hesitated, gaze flicking over Valise like a scientist spotting a prime specimen. "From what I know, you can't fully remove it without killing the host. Stabilization is possible if the parasite has a suitable bonding partner. Traditionally, that partner was another of her kind, but in theory, a genetically compatible being could serve the same function. She let her gaze settle on Amarin. His cheeks warmed under that scrutinizing stare. So we're stuck with each other? That's what you're saying? Velis bristled at the insinuation. Vatra waved a dismissive hand. It's not so simple. The parasite is compelling her toward you because your genetic signature must be close enough. If you resist, the parasite grows erratic, possibly lethal. If you comply but lack the right synergy, it might still lash out. The process can be intense, physically and psychologically. She paused. In short, you two need to find a way to harmonize permanently. Amri felt a spike of panic. Permanently? Like some cosmic marriage? Vetra snorted. Of sorts, though it could remain purely transactional if you prefer. She flicked a look at Velis, whose lips parted in a trembling exhalation. But, from what I see, the parasite is deeply entwined with her. This isn't a cold process. It will force emotional merging, too. Are you prepared for that? He swallowed. It's not a question of want, Velis murmured. It's necessity. Vetra shrugged. If you care to avoid corporate labs dissecting both of you, you might want to be discreet and figure it out. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other business. She stood, patted the salvage in her pocket, and left them with that bombshell. The din of the cantina swelled around them, half-heard conversations and music reverberating through the hazy air. Amarin found himself staring into Velis's luminous eyes, his heart thudding. She looked away, the silver filaments around her neck trembling with the agitation of the parasite. I'm sorry, she whispered. I never wanted to entangle you like this. He reached across the table, hesitantly brushing his fingers over hers. Her scaled skin felt surprisingly soft. Hey, we'll figure something out. She swallowed. We might not have long. It's been growing restless since we landed. He cursed under his breath. We can't stay in a place like this for too long. Let's find somewhere more private. They paid for a grimy storage unit that had been converted into lodging on the far side of the platform. It was barely larger than his ship's cargo hold, with a cot jammed next to a stack of crates. The walls hummed with the vibrations of nearby machinery. The single light overhead flickered unpredictably. Not exactly luxurious, but it was private enough to avoid prying eyes. Velis paced, arms crossed, trying to steady her breathing. He locked the door behind them. All right, he said, talk to me. How much time do we have? She met his gaze. The parasite is pushing me harder. It senses your warmth, your smell. It wants contact, an exchange of bodily fluids for the next stage of bonding. She paused, biting her lower lip in a very human gesture that made his stomach flip. If we deny it, it might go feral. I can't guarantee your safety, or mine. The air turned charged. Amarin found his heart drumming at the reality of what lay before them. This was no casual fling. It was a literal merging that might chain them together. He felt a pang of fear. Yet there was also a heady, undeniable attraction. She was enthralling, her alien features mesmerizing in the dim light. He stepped closer. And if we do this, how do we make sure we don't both end up in some meltdown? Her eyes gleamed with unspoken emotion. We must be gentle. The parasite feeds on the act of merging, but it also thrives on genuine connection. If either of us harbors violence or resentment, it will sense that hostility and turn it into destructive power. She reached out, her hand brushing along his jaw. The contact set off sparks across his skin. We have to trust each other. He exhaled shakily, placing his hands on her hips. She radiated warmth, an alluring contradiction of scaled texture and soft curves. She trembled at his touch, her filaments brightening. Trust? He repeated, half in wonder. I'm not good at that. She gave a mirthless smile. Nor am I. But we have little choice. There was a beat, a moment suspended between them, charged with possibilities. He leaned in, and she closed her eyes, breath hitching. Their lips met in a tentative brush that sent a shiver coursing through both of them. Amarin's mind spun. He was kissing an alien woman whose body housed a parasite that craved a bond with him. It was madness, Yet the sensation of her mouth against his, the faint reptilian rasp of her skin, combined with that intangible hum of energy, lit something inside him. She made a low, breathy sound, pressing closer. He could feel the parasite's presence as an electric current between them, tangling with his senses. It was almost as if a dozen subtle filaments brushed against his psyche, searching for acceptance. The closeness intensified, and the overhead light flickered more sharply, as though responding to the surge. He wrapped his arms around her, and she gripped his shoulders, fingers digging in. Time blurred. He lost track of the machine hum around them. Everything centered on the press of her body and the rapid pounding of his heart. A swirl of conflicting emotions battered him. Fear, excitement, protectiveness, an unsteady longing. Valis clutched at the back of his neck, her breath coming in ragged gasps that mingled with his own. Somewhere amid the haze, he remembered the warnings, the risk. Was this enough to satisfy the parasite, or would it demand more? They found themselves stumbling toward the cot, the tension between them thick. She slid her palms under his jacket along his sides. The parasite's energy sparked, and she gasped, arching as a surge coursed through her, bridging the gap to him. For a dizzy moment, he sensed her thoughts, fleeting images of her past, rotting corridors, captivity, screams, the parasite's infusion of survival. The intensity nearly overwhelmed him. He pulled back, breath hitching. Her eyes were dilated, chest heaving. "It's starting to entwine," she murmured, voice trembling. "If we continue, it will fuse further with my biology, tethering me to your essence." Emerin swallowed, nodded. We don't have to go all the way at once, right? We can take it slow, give it a bit of what it wants, then rest, build up trust. She nodded uncertainly. "We can try." They pressed their foreheads together, both panting, hearts pounding in unison. The flicker of the parasite's glow ebbed slightly. In that lull, they drew away, each grappling with an onslaught of new sensations. Despite the heady desire, they also felt the weight of the bond that threatened to form. "All right," Emerin said softly. "We'll do it step by step." She managed a shaky smile, settling beside him on the cot. Her body was still humming, and she shivered. He draped an old blanket around her shoulders. The neon sign from outside the unit's single grimy window lit her cheek in a shifting array of colors, emphasizing her unearthly beauty. She leaned against him, careful not to push too far, yet letting him provide some measure of comfort. When their breathing finally evened out, he felt a wave of exhaustion roll through him. He'd been braced for a fight or a flight for so long, the adrenaline crash left him reeling. She must have felt it too, because her eyes drifted closed. Before sleep could claim him, he wondered if tomorrow they'd wake to new complications. For now, though, he welcomed the warmth of her body, the purr of her breath, a strange sense of closeness that sprouted in the midst of chaos. They dozed fitfully, each jolting awake whenever a mechanical thud resonated through the platform, or voices passed too near the door. It was a precarious rest at best. When the faint light of the station's artificial day cycle began, Emerin roused to find Valis curled against his side, her scales cool to the touch, though her filaments radiated a gentle warmth. There was a moment where confusion flared. Where was he? Then it all rushed back. He felt a pang in his gut, realizing the dilemma they still faced. Valis stirred, blinking her unusual eyes as she slowly woke. A flush of color ghosted across her cheeks, perhaps from self-consciousness or from the parasite's morning hunger. She moved away slightly, as though embarrassed by her own vulnerability. Emerin rubbed at his temple. "We should check if Vatra has any further leads, or if there's someone else on this platform who might help. Maybe old records or medical devices." Valis nodded, though her expression was guarded. "Yes, the more knowledge we have about this symbiosis, the better we can manage it." Her voice caught. "But be wary. If word spreads that a living Valian is here, people will come for me." He rose, running fingers through his unruly hair. "We'll keep a low profile," he promised. "Just enough to gather intel, then we'll leave." They prepared to step out, each adjusting clothing and gear, ensuring no glowing filaments were visible beneath the hood Valis drew tight around her face. Before they left, she caught his wrist. Amarin, she whispered. Thank you for not treating me like a monster. He gave her hand a gentle squeeze. We're in this together. And for what it's worth, you've shown me more kindness than half the people I've met. She offered a faint, tremulous smile, and together they ventured out into the labyrinth of corridors. The day cycle brought no improvement to the dingy metal walls. Vendors hawked questionable wares in open alcoves, and a swirl of travelers moved in a perpetual bustle. They stuck to the shadows as best they could, navigating to a sub-level Vatra had once mentioned that housed old archives. Despite the tension, Valish seemed fascinated by every new face and species they passed, eyes flicking over reptilian traders, half-cybernetic hackers, and cloaked corporate buyers. Now and then a Moran noticed her filaments twitching beneath her hood, a sign the parasite was reacting to the crowd. She squeezed his arm, her breathing tight. He guided her into a quieter passage, letting her collect herself. They finally found a dim corridor leading to locked doors that presumably contained defunct data terminals. Amarin produced a makeshift hacking device, fiddling with the controls until the doors hissed open. They stepped into a stale chamber lined with flickering screens, old cables snaking across the floor. Dust motes shimmered in the overhead fluorescent lights. Working quickly, he powered up a console, the ancient interface sputtering. Valise hovered behind him, watchful. He ran a search for old medical or scientific records referencing Valerian parasites. The system groaned, lines of code flickering. After several minutes, a partial log surfaced, references to early corporate experiments, transcripts hinting at forced bonding procedures and violent outcomes. Valis's face paled as she scanned the data. It appears they tried to replicate the parasite synergy on unwilling subjects, Amarine muttered, scrolling through the text. It rarely succeeded, except in cases where the subject had unusual genetic markers that matched the parasite's needs. Valise's hands curled into fists. Now you see why they value me. They want to harness the parasite for armies or black market immortality. They believe it can resurrect or enhance a host indefinitely. Her voice quivered with anger. But the cost is unimaginable. He watched her reflection in the screen. Then we have to make sure they never get you. She nodded stiffly, then froze, posture going rigid. Someone's coming. Just as she said it, the door behind them slid open, revealing a tall, broad-shouldered figure in dark armor, flanked by two heavily armed goons. The leader's face was hidden behind a visor, but the sneer in his tone was clear. Well, looks like we've found ourselves an elusive pair. Amarin's stomach sank. He recognized the armor's style, a corporate enforcement unit. The figure stepped closer, leveling a sidearm at them. You'll come with us quietly, or we'll drag you out in pieces. Which do you prefer? Valis hissed, filaments bristling, the parasite responding to the threat. Amarin swore under his breath. They were cornered in a dead-end archive room. The corporate soldier nodded at his men, who moved in with practiced efficiency. We know about you, Valerian, the soldier said, his voice dripping with smugness. Your kind is all but extinct, so you'll fetch a fine price on the open market. Valis's eyes flashed. You won't lay a hand on me. She tensed, preparing to fight, but the soldier cocked his weapon. Try it. My men have orders to take you alive, but we're prepared to do it the hard way. Amarin's gaze flicked around, searching for an escape. The console, the cables, they had limited weaponry on them. Slowly, he raised his hands in a placating gesture, stepping forward. Look, we can talk about this. There's no need for violence. The soldier snorted. Oh, but there is. We've been tracking your ship's ID since you docked. You led us right to your precious alien. He raised his gun, aiming it at Amarian's chest. Now step aside. A split second later, the overhead lights flickered and Valise sprang. The parasite lent her inhuman speed, and she slid beneath the soldier's arm, claws raking across the chest plate. Sparks flew. Amarian lunged at the second goon, wrestling for control of his weapon. A shot blasted a nearby console, sending shards of broken display into the air. Amarin managed to elbow the goon, knocking him off balance. The next moment, Valise knocked the soldier's weapon to the floor, but the third goon swung a baton across her ribs. She gasped, stumbling. Her filaments glowed furiously, and with a guttural snarl, she unleashed a jolt of energy that crackled across the goon's armor, sending him crashing onto his back. The first soldier recovered, delivering a gauntleted punch to her side that drove the air from her lungs. She staggered, and Amarin leapt forward, hooking the soldier's arm to stop a follow-up strike. They grappled, bodies crashing into the dusty consoles. In the chaos, the soldier jammed a device against Valise's neck, a metallic clamp that hissed as it latched on. She cried out, knees buckling. Amarin roared in protest, smashing his elbow into the soldier's helmet. The soldier reeled, stumbling backward, but the device was already attached, blinking ominously. Valise sagged, filaments going dark. The soldier barked a harsh laugh. Neural disruptor, he spat, checking the crack in his visor. It'll keep her parasite from channeling energy. He swung his gaze to Amarin. Now stand down or I'll kill you. Amarin locked eyes with Valise, who was struggling, her lips parted in a soundless gasp. The device on her neck sparked, preventing her from focusing. The soldier advanced, weapon leveled. Hands where I can see them, he snapped. Blood pounded in Amarin's ears. Every survival instinct told him to throw down his gun, but as he spotted the way Valise trembled in the soldier's grasp, something snapped inside him. He'd sworn to help her, to keep her safe. Growling, he pivoted, kicking out at the soldier's hand. The shot fired wide, scorching a ceiling panel. Then he tackled the soldier, the momentum sending them both crashing into the far wall. The soldier was bigger, but Amarin's desperation fueled him. They traded blows, the soldier's armor absorbing most hits until Amarin ripped off the helmet's strap, exposing the man's jaw. He landed a savage punch that made the soldier reel. A second goon recovered, raising his rifle. In that split second, Valise summoned the last dregs of her strength, straining against the disruptor. She flung a hand out, releasing a flicker of energy. It wasn't much, but it made the goon's shot go wild. The beam scorched a hole in the floor instead. Amarin used the distraction to lunge for the disruptor clamped to Valise's neck, fumbling with the release mechanism. The soldier tried to grapple him away, but Valise clasped the soldier's arm, her claws biting into the unarmored joint. With a grunt of effort, Amarin ripped the clamp free. Valesia's eyes flashed open and the parasite's energy roared back. She let out a fierce cry and unleashed a pulse that knocked the soldier and his men into a heap. Panting, she rose on unsteady legs, and Amarin stood at her side, a protective arm around her waist. The men on the floor groaned, weapons scattered. He glanced at her. "We have to go, now." She nodded, fighting a wave of dizziness. Together, they bolted past the stunned goons out into the corridor. Alarms began to blare, the platform's security systems reacting to the firefight. They raced through the winding passages, heartbeats thundering. They burst into the main thoroughfare, weaving around startled citizens. Overhead speakers crackled. "Security alert. Non-compliant activity in sub-level archives." "Damn it," Amarin muttered. "We need to get back to the ship." Valise's filament still sparked with residual energy. "They'll try to intercept us." He nodded, scanning the crowd for more corporate uniforms. "I know, but if we don't get off this station, we're targets." They ran, forging a path through the throng. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught Amarin's eye. A squad of enforcement troopers stepping into the corridor ahead. He tugged Valise into a side passage, heart pounding. The station's design was a maze, but he knew a few shortcuts. He led her through an access corridor that bypassed the main thoroughfare, using old service walkways. Tension twisted in his gut, anticipating an ambush at every turn. Valise was panting, fighting the aftershocks of the disruptor. They emerged at a back entrance to Docking Bay 6, where his small vessel was berthed. The door hissed open, revealing a half-dozen armed men waiting by his ship. They turned at once, raising their rifles. Amarin's stomach lurched, but Valise set her jaw in grim determination. "We have no choice," she said. "We fight." Gunfire erupted. Amarin and Valise dove behind crates, bullets and energy pulses ricocheting. Some cargo ignited in a burst of sparks. Valise took a breath, focusing through the pain in her neck. She released a concussive wave that sent crates flying, scattering the guards. Amarin seized the opportunity to pick off a straggler with precise shots. They advanced inch by inch. ducking suppressive fire. An alarm klaxon blared overhead, intensifying the chaos. A pulse blast slammed into a console near Velis, sending her sprawling. Amarin clenched his teeth and fired on the attacker. With the immediate threat cleared, he grabbed Velis's arm, hauling her to her feet. She shook off the disorientation and they dashed up the ramp into his ship. The controls beeped warnings as he scrambled into the cockpit, slamming the hatch behind them. Velis fell into the co-pilot's seat, breathing hard. "Go! Get us out!" He powered up the engines, ignoring the frantic hail from station security. The docking clamps tried to lock them down, but he overrode them, causing mechanical shrieks as the ship pulled free. Shots from the docking bay soared past the viewport. Then, with a final roar of engines, they burst into space. Amarin angled them away from the station, weaving around the ring of patrolling ships. The sensors lit up with pursuers, but he pushed the throttle to maximum, plunging into a chaotic field of debris orbiting the planet. He wove through drifting scrap, the hull trembling from near misses. Velis clung to her seat, watching the readouts. 2 corporate fighters gave chase, firing short bursts. Amarin gritted his teeth. "Hold on," he warned. He jerked the ship starboard, letting the swirling debris help obscure them. A chunk of twisted metal collided with one pursuer, sending them spinning. The second fighter swooped around, but Amaran angled the ship to slip behind an enormous scrap of an abandoned cargo vessel. With practiced skill, he threaded through the wreckage, losing the fighter's line of sight. For a breathless moment they waited, sensors scanning. The fighter soared past, missing them. Amarin seized the chance to accelerate into faster-than-light slipstream, leaving Zatan's frontier behind. For a minute, the cockpit was filled with the hum of engines and the pounding of his own pulse. Then Velis exhaled, sinking back in the seat. "We did it," she breathed, though relief was muted by the ache in her voice. "They'll keep looking." He nodded grimly. "We can't go back. We're officially fugitives." She closed her eyes, hand drifting to the bruise on her neck where the disruptor had latched. "I dragged you into this." "Doesn't matter," he said firmly. "They'd have found a reason to come after me eventually. I deal with shady circles." A faint half-smile curved his lips. "Besides, you're worth more than any salvage to me right now." Her eyes fluttered open at that, an unreadable emotion flickering across her face. The parasite's filaments glowed softly, as if responding to the sincerity in his words. "Amarin," she began, but her voice caught. He reached over, gently touching the side of her face, careful of her scales. "I mean it," he said quietly. "We'll figure this out. I'm tired of running, but if we have to run to keep you safe, so be it." Her lips parted in a silent thank you, and a subtle current passed between them, a momentary calm in the midst of chaos. In that hush, the parasite stirred less violently, seeming almost soothed by the connection. They remained in slipstream for hours, forging a path into uncharted territory. He set the autopilot, then turned to her with quiet concern. "Let me look at that bruise." She allowed him to lift her hood and examine the angry red marks. The disruptor's clamp had burned her skin. He fetched a small medkit, carefully applying a salve, his fingers gentle on her neck. She winced but stayed still. The closeness made his heart pound. He felt her breath warm against his wrist. When he finished, she caught his hand. Her scales were so different from his own skin, yet somehow it felt natural to hold hands. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." He nodded, swallowing against the lump in his throat. "We'll keep searching for answers," he said softly. "Maybe somewhere deeper into the outer verge, away from corporate reach, we'll find knowledge about your species' bonding traditions. Something that can guide us." She managed a small smile, though it carried threads of sadness. "I hope so." Their gaze lingered, a current of empathy and tension. She broke away first, exhaling. "I can feel the parasite reeling from the disruptor's interference. It's confused and hungry again," he grimaced, remembering Vatra's words about permanent synergy, about how it would only stabilize if they truly opened themselves to each other, body and heart. "One day at a time," he murmured, though he knew it might be sooner than that. The parasite might not wait patiently for a slow progression. She rose, moving carefully into the cabin to find a place to rest. He watched her go, an ache in his chest that wasn't entirely unpleasant. A flicker of adrenaline still coursed through him from the confrontation. And beneath it all, a swirl of emotions he could scarcely name. She was a puzzle, a danger, but also something more precious than he cared to admit. Slumping back in the pilot's chair, he gazed out at the swirling patterns of slipstream. He thought about how quickly his life had shifted from routine scavenging to a fight for survival with an alien woman bound to a parasite. He rubbed a hand over his face. Maybe it was madness, but a quiet part of him whispered that this was the path he'd unconsciously sought, a reason to live for something more than cold profit. Maybe the universe had given him a purpose in the form of a luminous, fierce being who needed him as much as he, unexpectedly, might need her. He let out a shaky breath and closed his eyes, letting the steady hum of the engines lull him into a brief doze. Darkness enveloped him, dreams swirling with images of Velise's scaled cheeks, her glowing eyes, the jolt of energy that flared whenever they touched. It was a collision of fear and longing. When he woke, he realized he was no closer to sorting out how he truly felt, but at least they were alive. That was something. They spent several days traveling deeper into the outer verge, skirting fringe systems where law was loose. He and Velise maintained a delicate dance of closeness and caution. Sometimes, late at night, they found themselves drawn to each other, sharing lingering touches and tentative kisses that allowed the parasite to feed enough to stave off madness. But they hadn't fully surrendered to the bond, each one skirting the final threshold. Emerin told himself they needed more data, more certainty, yet each day the tension grew. Meanwhile, corporate bulletins trickled through the subspace comms, placing a bounty on a highly dangerous alien female and her human accomplice. They used anonymized channels, but there was no mistaking the description. The noose was tightening. Eventually, they arrived at the edges of a swirling nebula known for hidden enclaves. Among the drifting gas clouds was rumored to be a remote station run by exiles, some of whom collected ancient artifacts and knowledge. If there were surviving records of Valyrian culture, perhaps they'd find them there. The approach was harrowing. The sensors often scrambled by ionized particles. Emerin navigated by skill and a bit of guesswork, constantly adjusting course. Velise stood by his side, tension radiating from her. Her luminous markings flared each time they encountered turbulence. She seemed restless, and he suspected the parasite's hunger was mounting. He tried to ignore the growing awareness of her closeness, the way her body tensed whenever he brushed past her. They were tethered by necessity, but something deeper was forming. He caught glimpses of it whenever her eyes lingered on him, a new softness that transcended survival. At last the sensor beeped, indicating a small structure hidden within the nebula's swirling mists. Dim lights glimmered around a ring-like platform that clung to a chunk of rock. Emerin guided the ship in, uncertain what reception they'd find. The docking clamps engaged with a creak, and a hissing atmosphere welcomed them. They stepped out onto a platform lit by flickering torches, an odd sight in the modern galaxy. Hooded figures moved about, some tending to cargo, others whispering in corners. This was a place beyond normal rules. They passed through corridors that seemed carved from the rocky interior of the asteroid. Strange glyphs adorned the walls, swirling patterns reminiscent of archaic script. Eventually, they were ushered into a cavernous chamber lined with shelves of old data tablets and scrolls. The entire station was a strange meld of technology and ancient design. A robed caretaker approached, face partially obscured. "Travelers, you've come seeking knowledge?" Emery nodded, his voice echoing softly. "Yes, specifically on Valyrian parasites and bonding rituals." The caretaker's gaze flicked to Velise with keen interest. "I've heard tales, but never seen one in the flesh." He beckoned them deeper into the chamber. "Follow." They found themselves in a small alcove, stacked with stone tablets. The caretaker rummaged until he produced one carved slab. Though the symbols were alien, Velise seemed to recognize them. She ran her fingers along the engravings, her breath catching. "This is my people's script," she whispered. "Older than anything I've read." The caretaker gave a slight nod. "My order has collected fragments from many lost civilizations. We do not judge, only preserve knowledge." He tapped the tablet. "It references a binding ceremony, a union between host and partner meant to tame the parasite's impulses and transform it into a force of harmony." Amerin's heart thumped. "So it's possible?" The caretaker inclined his head. "In theory, yes, but it demands more than physical merging. It requires an open heart, a willingness to share life essence without reservation or fear. The ceremony, as described, is deeply intimate. If either partner holds doubt or secrecy, the parasite can twist that into corruption. He looked at them pointedly. One must face the other in total vulnerability. Amarin felt Valis' gaze land on him. He swallowed, recalling all the guarded secrets he kept locked in his heart. Could he truly open himself to her, trust her so completely? Fear warred with the growing certainty that this might be their only chance. Valis's eyes shone, reflecting the torchlight. "I want this," she said softly. I'm tired of letting the parasite control me. I want to share it, guide it with someone I trust." She turned to Amarin, voice trembling. "But do you trust me enough to do the same?" A wave of conflicting emotions washed over him. Every survival instinct told him to keep his walls up, yet, seeing the vulnerability etched in her features, remembering all they'd been through and the gentle strength she showed, he realized that a part of him already trusted her. Slowly he nodded. "Yes," he said, though it came out half-choked. "I do," the caretaker exhaled, expression solemn. "Then prepare. The ritual requires a private, sacred space, an alignment of energies. We have a chamber for such ceremonies, but you must be sure. Once begun, it cannot be undone." They exchanged a look. Valis took his hand, her fingers trembling, a mixture of excitement and fear. "I'm ready," she said, voice low but resolute. He squeezed her hand, heart hammering. "Me too." The caretaker led them through twisting corridors into a softly lit chamber ringed with glowing crystals. The air felt charged, as if laced with static. A circular dais occupied the center, its surface etched with swirling patterns. "Stand there and let the resonance of the crystals guide the union," the caretaker said, then bowed out, leaving them alone. They stepped onto the dais, bathed in a gentle glow. Valis's filaments shimmered as though responding to the crystal's frequencies. Amarin felt a subtle vibration under his feet, resonating up his legs, stirring something in his chest. She faced him, letting her hood fall. Her scaled cheeks caught the crystal light, the markings glowing faintly. He reached out, brushing his knuckles against her jawline. She leaned into the touch, exhaling. "I've never done this," she whispered. "We were taught it was the old ways, lost to time. But it feels right." He nodded, stepping closer, their bodies almost touching. "Same. I've never let anyone in, not fully, but with you, I want to try." Their foreheads met gently, breath mingling. The dais glowed brighter, and he felt a tingling warmth spread through his limbs. Valis closed her eyes, focusing inward. Slowly, her filaments extended, brushing lightly against him, not just physically but emotionally. He felt the edge of her mind, a swirl of images and sensations, the parasite stirring with cautious curiosity. He thought of his own guarded past, the wounds he carried. He realized he had to open those doors or risk the parasite, feeding on secrecy and fear. Summoning courage, he let down his barriers, letting her sense the swirl of guilt, regret, and longing that haunted him. She gasped softly, and he felt her sympathy flood back. She showed him memories of her own captivity. The moment the parasite first latched on to keep her alive, the pain of losing family, the swirl of telepathic sharing left them both trembling. Yet the more they opened, the gentler the resonance became, as if the crystals were harmonizing with their growing understanding. He slid his hands around her waist, pulling her closer, and she wrapped her arms around him. Their lips met in a kiss that wasn't frantic or desperate this time, but deep and tender. She parted her mouth with a soft exhale, and he sensed the parasite's presence slipping between them, weaving intangible threads of connection. A surge of warmth swelled in his chest, so strong it nearly buckled his knees. Their breathing synchronized, hearts pounding in tandem. Wave after wave of sensation coursed through them, an intricate dance of acceptance. He felt her body tremble as she surrendered to the bond, and he poured every ounce of trust he had into that shared space. The dais's glow intensified until the chamber seemed filled with soft radiance. Their kiss deepened, and the parasite fed on the mutual vulnerability, not in a predatory way, but in a symbiotic flow that bound them tighter. In that moment, there was no station, no corporate threat, just the two of them and the tapestry of emotion that spanned their intertwined minds. Time lost meaning, their hands roamed each other in reverent awe, discovering new textures and shapes, forging a sense of safety in skin-to-skin contact. He gasped against her mouth as her claws grazed his back, not painful, but intensifying the shiver of pleasure. She whimpered softly when his fingers combed through the filaments along her neck, the parasite responding with a ripple of energy that arced between them. He experienced an almost out-of-body sense of closeness, as if his consciousness mingled with hers in a swirl of shared heartbeat and breath. He felt her longing for acceptance, her fear of hurting him, and her fierce desire to protect what they were creating. It resonated with his own hidden yearning for a real connection, for someone who saw beyond his guarded exterior. As the glow reached a crescendo, she clutched him, eyes fluttering open. They were blazing with radiant light, a reflection of the parasite's final merging. He held her, anchoring them both, letting the energy surge. His vision blurred with brilliance, and for a second he felt as though they stood on the edge of a cosmic wellspring, blending their essences in an ancient rite that transcended logic. Then, gently, the light began to fade. Their breathing was ragged, pulses still thundering as the dais' glow subsided to a soft luminescence. They remained locked in each other's arms, foreheads pressed together. The resonance in the chamber settled, leaving behind a warm hum in their chests. The parasite, now satiated and stabilized, hummed like a contented presence within Valise, no longer demanding or feral. Slowly they separated just enough to see each other's faces. She blinked, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. "It's so quiet," she whispered, touching her chest. "I've never felt it so at peace." He swallowed, stunned at the emotional weight that pressed on him, yet it was not oppressive. It was a sweetness, a depth of intimacy he'd never known. "Are you all right?" She smiled through trembling lips. "Yes. The hunger is gone. It's fulfilled." She slipped her arms around his neck, pressing her cheek to his. "I feel you inside me, your emotions, your hopes." He tightened his hold on her waist, equally overwhelmed. "I feel you too. It's like we're connected here." He pressed a hand over his heart, wonder filling his voice. "This is more than just a forced bond, right?" She nodded, tears bright in her eyes. "It's real. We chose each other." They remained there, sharing breaths in the dimming glow, letting the enormity of what just happened sink in. The caretaker's soft footsteps eventually approached, but he paused at a respectful distance. "I sense you have completed the ceremony," Amarin nodded, guiding Velis off the dais. She leaned into him, still unsteady but lit with a serene glow. "Yes, we have." The caretaker bowed. "It is done. May you find strength and unity in your new bond." They left the chamber hand in hand, hearts pounding with new purpose. Although exhaustion tugged at them, a surge of euphoria lingered. The robed caretaker led them back to a small lodging area where they could rest in privacy. There they sank onto a modest bedding mat, Velis pressed close, half laughing, half sobbing. She touched his face with reverence. He cupped the back of her head, exhaling a long breath. You're glowing," he murmured, seeing the faint luminescence in her cheeks. She laughed softly. "Look who's talking." Indeed, a faint aura of the parasite's energy clung to him as well, evidence of the bond bridging them. They settled against each other, letting the intensity subside into warmth. The caretaker left them alone, presumably giving them time to recover. Amarin found his mind drifting to the future. They had stabilized the parasite, forging a bond that gave them an unbreakable intimacy. But outside these walls, the threat of corporate hunters still loomed. He brushed his thumb over Velis's lower lip. "We have so much to figure out, where we go from here, how to stay safe. But at least we won't be struggling alone anymore." She nodded, eyes bright. "Whatever comes, we face it together." For a moment, they simply let the silence cradle them, heart to heart. He sensed her relief, her quiet joy in the bond they shared, and he reciprocated with an outpouring of care he'd never known he could give. In that stillness, the seeds of genuine love took root. Entwined with the parasite that no longer threatened to devour them, but instead wove them closer, in both body and soul. They remained on the hidden station for a few days, gathering their strength and gleaning more from the caretaker's archives. He showed them additional tablets detailing Valyrian customs, some tragically lost, others describing how once bonded pairs served as guardians for their people, channeling the parasite's power for healing and protection. Valise drank it all in, her face alight with a bittersweet blend of longing for what had been destroyed and hope for a possible renewal. Amaran also learned more about the potential gifts the parasite bestowed. Enhanced empathy, the ability to share certain sensations, a minor healing factor. It all sounded miraculous, but it hinged on mutual trust and emotional harmony. If resentment or betrayal grew, the parasite could spiral into destructive fury. He thought back to the moment they overcame their fears in the ritual, realizing it had been the tipping point for forging a safer path. Now they had to maintain that trust despite the external threats that might push them apart. Their intimate connection continued to deepen in subtle ways. At times, when he brushed her arm or gazed into her eyes, a gentle wave of warmth coursed through them both. The caretaker's quiet acceptance of their bond made it easier for Amaran to relax. He found himself smiling more often, a new lightness in his steps. Valise seemed more confident, no longer skulking in the corners, though she still carried a cautious wariness about what lurked beyond. Eventually, they knew it was time to leave. The caretaker offered them no illusions. Corporate networks extended far, and once the station's location was discovered, their sanctuary might be compromised. They needed to keep moving to find a life on the run or possibly fight back. As they prepared their ship for departure, the caretaker bowed once more. May your bond be a beacon that guides you. They left the station behind, venturing back into the swirling nebula. Inside the cockpit, Amaran and Valise shared a quiet moment. He took her hand as he activated the slipstream drive. Ready? She gazed at him, eyes shining. As long as we're together, yes. They jumped, the stars smearing into brilliant lines. In that silent rush of faster-than-light travel, she slid into his lap, pressing her forehead to his. The parasite's warmth swelled between them, a comfortable presence now rather than a predatory force. She closed her eyes, and he cradled her. She murmured, I sense your thoughts, your worry. Are you afraid this was too easy? He chuckled ruefully. Easy? Didn't feel easy to me. She smiled, grazing his cheek with her fingertips. You know what I mean. We found our bond, but we haven't faced the empire that hunts us. He nodded, stroking her filaments, which glowed happily at his touch. We'll have to decide how to handle that. We can't hide forever. A flicker of resolution sparked in his eyes. Vatra said the corporations want the parasite to create an army. We could expose them or sabotage their operations. If we fight back, maybe we can free any other survivors of your race. Valise's eyes flooded with gratitude. You would do that? Risk yourself for them? He pressed a kiss to her forehead. I've spent most of my life looking out for myself, but now I have a reason to do more. She sighed against him, contentment mixing with a rising determination. Then let's find a path to strike at them so no one else has to suffer. They emerged from slipstream near an uncharted sector. She slid off his lap, taking the co-pilot's seat. Together, they scanned the starfield. The comm array crackled, picking up fragments of transmissions. He recognized certain corporate codes, referencing security logs in a search for the Valyrian asset. A cold anger tightened his chest. They were out there, relentlessly combing the galaxy for her, for them both. He glanced at Valise. We'll need allies, maybe your people, if any are still free, or the local rebel groups who resent corporate expansion. She lifted her chin. If we can free even a few Valyrians, we could unite to resist. I don't have names or addresses, but there must be some out there. Emery nodded, charting a course to a rumored haven for exiled alien species. They had meager clues, but it was a start. The pilot console beeped, indicating a potential lead, an old series of star maps referencing migration patterns. It might direct them to regions where Valyrian survivors once fled. They set off, preparing for a long journey. In the quiet intervals, they turned to each other for solace. The bond had taken root, forging not just a truce with the parasite, but an intimacy that bridged the gulf between two very different beings. That closeness grew deeper, their kisses more certain, touches more reverent. More than once, they found themselves tangled in the narrow bunk of the ship, bodies pressed together in shared warmth, the parasite humming approval at their communion. Yet even as passion flared, the emotional foundation was a slow burn, each day bringing new layers of trust. Sometime later, as the ship drifted through a particularly turbulent patch of subspace, Valus roused from a light doze. She found Amarin sitting in the cockpit, gazing at the swirling streams of cosmic dust outside. She approached silently, noticing the tension in his shoulders. Placing a hand on his back, she sensed a churn of old fears in him. He turned, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Couldn't sleep," he admitted. "I keep thinking about how we're up against a massive juggernaut. We're just two people. And a parasite, I guess." She slid into his lap, arms encircling his neck, the luminous lines on her cheeks casting soft patterns on his face. "We have more than that," she said quietly. "We have our bond. We have determination. And somewhere out there we might find others who share our cause." He rested a hand on her waist. "True." He searched her eyes. "Does the parasite still push you?" She shook her head. "It's different now. It doesn't want to dominate. It's more like a quiet presence that thrives on our unity. It's not driving me mad with hunger." She pressed her palm over his heart. "I think it's found a home here." Her words filled him with a warmth that chased away the chill of doubt. They stayed like that for a while, simply sharing the calm of each other's presence in the softly lit cockpit. Eventually, they activated the next slipstream jump, forging deeper into uncharted space, guided by the faint hope of finding Valus's people. Days blended together as they hopped from one star system to another, following tenuous leads. Sometimes the trail went cold, and they encountered only empty wastelands or abandoned habitats. During one such excursion, they landed on a small moon with a dusty outpost that might have had records of alien refugees. The outpost turned out to be deserted, its buildings ravaged by storms. As they searched the crumbling structures, a sense of isolation crept in, until they stumbled upon a battered data terminal with partial logs referencing a group of Valyrian exiles who fled decades ago. Coordinates were missing, but the name of a star cluster was mentioned. Clinging to that clue, they pressed onward. In the quiet moments between slipstreams, they shared stories, forging a deeper closeness. Valise learned about Amarin's childhood dreams, how he lost his parents to a corporate mining accident. That loss fueled his distrust of the system, pushing him into scavenging. He'd kept walls around his heart to avoid more pain. She, in turn, told him about her earliest memories of her clan, living in hidden enclaves until slavers raided them. The parasite had saved her from death but cost her her freedom in other ways. Now, with him, she found a new chance at life. Their bond manifested in subtle ways. They could sense each other's emotional states, sometimes finishing each other's sentences or exchanging knowing glances without speaking. At times, that closeness was overwhelming. They'd argue over small things, navigation choices or ration supplies, but swiftly sensed the deeper fear or frustration behind the surface. The arguments rarely lasted long, diffused by the empathy the parasite helped foster. Finally, after weeks of travel, they arrived at the edges of a star cluster rumored to house hidden communities of exiles. Scans revealed a planet with trace signs of advanced life, though heavily shielded from detection. They approached cautiously, scanning for corporate patrols. None were evident, which was both reassuring and suspicious. Entering orbit around the forested planet, they found a single settlement nestled in a lush valley. Structures blended with the environment, canopies of giant trees overshadowing them. Valis felt a stirring of recognition. "This architecture, I think it's similar to what my people used to build." Amarin guided the ship down, landing near the settlement's perimeter. They exited cautiously, scanning for threats. The air was warm and humid, carrying the scent of alien flora. Towering trees glowed faintly in the dusk, reminiscent of Velus's filaments. Movement caught their attention. Figures emerged from the foliage, each bearing scaled features or luminous markings similar to Velus. Some had visible filaments, others wore cloaks. One stepped forward, older, with dark lines etched along her cheeks. She studied Velis with wide eyes. You carry the parasite? Velis inclined her head, stepping closer. I do. I'm Velis, of the Valyrian lineage. Are you? The older woman exhaled shakily. Yes, we are what's left of our people hidden here. She glanced at Amarin warily. The human is your partner? Amarin dipped his head in acknowledgement. I share the bond with her. A ripple of murmur swept through the gathered exiles. The older woman slowly approached Velis, resting a palm over Velis's cheek near the glowing patterns. You have completed the old ceremony. Velis nodded, voice trembling with emotion. I thought all was lost. But you're here. Tears sparkled in the older woman's eyes. We have hidden, waiting for a time to re-emerge, to free our enslaved kin. Some of us have lost the parasites, others keep them dormant. You are a beacon of hope, a successful bond. She turned to the crowd. We must shelter them, learn from them. They could help us reclaim our heritage. A younger Valyrian stepped forward. But we must also be cautious. The corporations search for us everywhere. Amarin exchanged a look with Velis. We know. They've been hunting us ever since we left the frontier. We're here to warn you and possibly stand with you if you'll have us. The older woman's gaze swept over them with both sorrow and resolve. We have waited for the day one of our kind might return with the bond intact. It proves the parasite can exist in harmony, even with an outsider's genetics. It proves we have a future. In the days that followed, the exiles welcomed Velis and Amarin into their hidden enclave. They showed them dwellings built high in the glowing trees, explained their traditions, and shared their longing to free their enslaved brethren. Many were intrigued by Amarin, seeing him as a symbol that alliances beyond their race were possible. Children peered curiously at him from behind tree trunks. He felt a self-conscious flush, but also a pang of protectiveness toward these gentle, reclusive people. Velis immersed herself in learning the old rites. She spent hours with elders, absorbing knowledge about harnessing the parasite's gifts without harm. She gleaned ways to channel it for healing or empathy rather than violence. She and Amarin practiced together, forging a deeper synergy. At times, they hovered on the edge of each other's consciousness, a gentle merging that left them breathless and closer than before. Under the planet's twin moons, they found moments of private bliss. One evening, after a communal gathering around a fire, they slipped away into a secluded grove. The air was thick with the scent of night-blooming flowers. Soft bioluminescent petals glowed underfoot. Velis turned to him, her scales shimmering in the moonlight. I feel like I'm finally home, she whispered, but it's a home I never knew. Shared with you. He pulled her into his arms. Wherever we go next, you won't be alone. Their lips met in a lingering kiss, the parasite's presence a gentle thrumming within their bond. They sank onto a soft bed of moss, bodies entwining in the hush of the forest. Tendrils of alien flora brushed their skin, weaving them into the living tapestry of this place. The connection they'd forged reached deeper, guided by mutual trust and raw emotion. This time there was no fear of losing control. Their shared breath mingled with the hush of leaves. She pressed her cheek to his, exhaling a trembling sigh as his hands explored the curves of her scaled body, each touch igniting slow, sensual warmth. Their clothing slipped away in pieces, baring skin to moonlight and each other's hungry gazes. She moaned softly when his lips found her throat, and he shivered at the ripple of her filaments dancing against his chest. Every caress carried meaning beyond pure desire. They were weaving a tapestry of comfort, belonging, and the quiet triumph of having found each other against all odds. The parasite pulsated in harmony, enhancing their sensations without consuming them. They marveled at how natural it felt, as though they'd always been two parts of the same cosmic puzzle. Time became fluid. Their whispered confessions and soft cries merged with the rhythmic chorus of nocturnal creatures. The bond opened them to waves of each other's pleasure and vulnerability, forging a closeness that felt transcendent. As they lost themselves in that union, the forest around them glowed brighter, as if bearing witness to their communion. When the stars had shifted and their breaths finally slowed, they lay entwined under the silver glow of the twin moons. Her head rested on his shoulder, filaments gently pulsing against his skin. He stroked her scales, contentment lulling him, even as an undercurrent of determination flowed beneath the surface. They would not remain in ideal forever, but for tonight they claimed this peace as their own. Over the following weeks, Amarin and Velis aided the exiles in planning a mission to liberate fellow Valyrians enslaved in distant corporate labs. Scouts brought back intelligence of a key facility, heavily guarded, but crucial for the corporation's research. If they could destroy or disrupt it, they might strike a blow that set many free. Amarin helped train some of the younger Valyrians in using salvaged weapons, while Velis taught them the control techniques she'd discovered. Though overshadowed by the risk of infiltration, the settlement buzzed with a sense of unity and purpose. They had a chance to shape their own destiny. Finally, the day arrived. Under cover of darkness, a small strike team boarded Amarin's ship. He flew them through back channels, avoiding detection. Velis stood at his side, gripping his arm. She was no longer the frightened exile in a lonely station. She radiated determination, her parasite purring in readiness. He could feel her heartbeat through the bond, steady and resolute. They emerged from Slipstream near the coordinates of the corporate facility. It orbited a small barren moon bristling with turrets and patrol ships. Carefully, they used sensor-fooling tactics to slip into the facility's docking bay. A tense hush fell over the group. This was it. Either they liberated the captives or fell into the corporate trap. They moved swiftly once inside, Velis leading them through corridors with a map gleaned from stolen data. Guards were dispatched with minimal force, often incapacitated with pulses of the parasite's energy before they could raise alarms. Amarin guided the exiles, covering their flank. He recalled every fight he'd been in, but this time, the cause was bigger than profit. He fought to protect the people who had given them sanctuary. The deeper they went, the more horrifying the facility became. Cells lined the hallways, each holding a Valyrian or another alien species subjected to experiments. Velis's rage boiled, and she had to quell the parasite's violent impulses. With practiced control, she funneled that energy into disabling security systems. They freed captive after captive, leading them out in a growing wave of liberation. Alarms blared. Corporate soldiers descended in force, but the exiles fought with a unity rarely seen. Their synergy, enhanced by contact with Velis, enabled them to move as one cohesive unit. Amarin found himself in a firefight protecting the newly freed prisoners. His heart hammered, but each time fear threatened to paralyze him, he felt a reassuring echo of Velis's presence in his mind. At last they reached the central control room. Velis and an elder teamed up to disable the facility's main power grid. Sparks flew and the structure's lights flickered. Freed captives streamed out, guided by exiles who led them to waiting ships. The corporate soldiers faltered, disorganized without their command systems. In a final desperate stand, a high-ranking officer confronted them, brandishing an advanced energy weapon. He aimed at Velis, recognizing her from the bounty. "You abomination," he snarled. "You should be in our labs." Amarin stepped in front of her, gun raised. "Not today," he fired. The shot tore through the officer's armor, dropping him. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of damaged machinery. They fled the control room just as a meltdown alarm began to blare. The facility's reactors were destabilizing. Racing through corridors, they joined the others boarding ships. Explosions rocked the complex. Amarin's small craft launched with the strike team, while other shuttles carried the freed Valyrians. The moon's surface cracked under the facility's collapse. He engaged Slipstream at the first safe interval, heart thrumming with the rush of victory. When they emerged into open space, they saw the ragtag flotilla of liberated prisoners, each craft battered but free. Cheers and cries echoed over the comms. Velis let out a trembling exhale, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. Amarin squeezed her hand, tears stinging his own eyes. They'd done it. In the days that followed, the freed captives joined the hidden enclave. Word spread of the successful raid, and other exiled Valyrians emerged from hiding across the sector. A community began to flourish in that forested valley, and alliances formed with other species that had been wronged by the corporations. A fledgling coalition took shape, dedicated to resisting oppressive forces. Amarin and Velis became recognized figures of hope, While many revered Valise for carrying the parasite in harmony, they also looked to Amarin as proof that unity could bridge species. He humbly waved off any claims of heroism, but the gratitude in their eyes was undeniable. She stood at his side, proud and unafraid. Their bond was no longer a secret or an anomaly. It was a symbol of possibility. On a warm evening, with the twin moons shining overhead, they found a moment alone in the high branches of a luminous tree. The leaves glowed softly around them. He looked out over the bustling settlement below, fires lit, laughter carrying on the breeze. A community rebuilding itself. She slipped an arm around his waist, resting her head on his shoulder. He felt the gentle hum of the parasite, a content presence, no longer ravenous or fearful. "We've come so far," she murmured, recalling the day they first met in that derelict station. "I never thought I'd find a home or someone like you." He turned, framing her face with his hands. "I never thought I'd find any kind of purpose beyond scraping by. But you've changed everything, Valise." He stroked the ridges of her scales, his voice low with emotion. "I love you, parasite and all." Her eyes welled with tears, reflecting the faint glow of the leaves. "I love you too. Without your trust, I'd still be lost." She lifted on her toes, pressing a tender kiss to his lips. He deepened it, heart pounding, letting the bond wash warmth through them both. When they parted, she blinked back tears and smiled. "So what now?" He gazed out at the brightening lights below. "We help these people rebuild. We stand with them against the corporation. We keep forging a life together." She nestled closer, filaments brushing against his neck. "Yes, together." They stayed there in each other's arms, perched in the softly glowing branches, hearts full of a calm determination. The night air carried the promise of battles yet to come, but also the reassurance that they would face them side by side. Freed from the parasite's torment, free from the lonely paths that once defined them, they had carved out a new destiny in the hidden corners of the galaxy, bound by love, forged through danger, and glowing with a unity that transcended fear.